Hello, hello, everyone. Hey, welcome. How are you doing? In today's live, we're going to be talking about the emotion boardroom. I mean, emotions are always there. They always are. We can't escape them, no matter what we try to do. And when dealing with rheumatoid arthritis or any other physical limitation, um, those emotions are going to be um, all over the place. But I'm kind of hesitating as we're going through that because that's true actually no matter what. Emotions are always all over the place. I guess when you have RA or a physical limitation, they will likely be having a heyday on that particular situation, that particular circumstance. And and so I want to talk about this concept of a boardroom, and it's actually building on content from a live I did previously called um, let me make sure I get it right. Getting through negative emotion. Getting through negative emotion. If you haven't already watched that live or that replay, you can go find it or message me if you have difficulty finding it. I'll send you the link. Getting through negative emotion. There's some foundational concepts there, and this builds on that. Um, this is essentially another tool um, to get through negative emotion. And I've heard it fairly recently, and I've just kind of been playing with the idea and using it in my own day-to-day activities, and I find it pretty insightful. And the concept of a boardroom, of course, let's see, primarily comes from a work type context, an office type of environment, and I'm going to elaborate on that a bit. I'm going to play on that context, that situation, to talk about um, why boardrooms are a thing, right? Um, at work. And then I'll apply that to our lives and how this concept can be useful in our lives and when it particularly comes to getting through negative emotion. And um, actually, as we get into this, I would love to just for you to go ahead and put in the comments. Take a moment to connect with emotion. What emotion are you feeling right now? One word. Typically, when I talk about emotions, and if I'm inviting you to respond by sharing what emotion you're experiencing or what you are feeling, it, it has to be one word. Because often we'll give a sentence, we'll give multiple words to be like, hey, how are you feeling? And people will say, I'm feeling like things are getting better. Well, that, my friend, is a thought. That's a sentence. That's not a feeling. So it would be the emotion. Okay, you could even take the sentence if you have difficulty getting in touch with your body right away, you can just take the sentence that you just shared and focus on it and then pay attention to your body. And how do you feel when you think that thought? So if I use this example, this thought, hey, I think things are getting better. I would just like fixate my attention on that just for a moment and get into my body. What's the feeling? I think things are getting better. I might say the emotion that comes to me, encouraged. I feel encouraged. Okay? So that's a little demonstration of what I mean by getting in touch with your body and um, pausing for a moment to connect with emotion. So go ahead and share in the comments or in the chat um, one word emotion for what you're feeling right now. Okay, keep those comments coming. Now, um, let's see. All right. Okay, why do we connect with emotion? Why did I just pause and ask you to share that emotion? Um, well, number one, emotions are always there, which is what I started with, right? They're always part of our experience. They're part of the human experience. And I think so much of our society and so much of our conditioning and so much of the way that we live, and even in Christianity, I'll say too, based on um, my background in Christianity, I think there's so often this emphasis on numbing out emotion. And it when I say numbing out, I don't mean with substances. There's also that, of course, we have substances, alcohol and recreational drugs and those kinds of things that definitely numb out emotion. Um, but even without substances, there's this. I mean, people don't say it in this way. They don't say, "Hey, I'm just numbing out my emotion." But what they are doing is avoiding emotion by saying, "Hey, I'm just gonna be positive," or like people will say things like, you know, "Oh, I'm feeling achy today, but you know what? That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes." Kind of like this mentality of like, I kind of gotta buck up. If I'm complaining, I'm a wimp. That's like common conditioning, common culture that I've seen. Um, or I've seen things like, shame around. I think the reason why people will stamp out any sort of complaining or negativity is because when it comes to a Christian context, it's like we're taught to have faith or have hope. Um, have faith, have hope, trust in God, and if at any time we're complaining or feeling discouraged or doubtful or some of these other emotions that are anything and everything except faith, hope, and trust, we are shameful about it. And we stamp those things out. We numb. But that's what I mean by the numbing. It's like we kind of like um, act as if, act as if that emotion isn't there. It's like it's there, but then we kind of skirt around it. Kind of skirt around it. We kind of be like, or we kind of dismiss it. We dismiss it in a way. Um, and so emotions are always there, and we're often dismissing them. Number one. Number two, um, emotions are there for a good reason. Emotions actually have value. They actually do. Even negative emotion. And there's a whole nother like topic on this I could really dive into that I'm not going to. And I'm actually kind of it's a level of depth that I haven't been into so much before. I haven't spent a whole lot of time in, but th- all I'll say is there's a whole lot of research about this. A whole lot of research about um, the the rationale of emotion. Like there's good reason for emotion, for the existence of emotion and for the negative emotion you might be experiencing. It's not there for no reason. There's a reason it's there. And if you will tap into that, like get present with that and get curious about it, it is a incredible source of information and information not just like not just I'll just say useful information. I was gonna say, um, I'm looking for my words. It's like information that's when I say information, usually it's like the term information is broad and it means there's a whole bunch of junk. When I say information, I think there's lots of irrelevant content. But what I'm trying to say when it comes to emotion is that it has information that has relevance, right? Relevance to you. It has very meaningful information. It has very powerful insights for you, for your condition, your circumstance, for your emotional well being, um, for your desires, for the way you want to live. Emotion um, gives us a path to a lot of that really, really meaningful, relevant, and useful information. All right, so let's talk about boardrooms. Um, a boardroom in a work context, a table in the middle of the room and chairs around it. Okay? It's a very specific format, a very specific layout. And why do we have a table in the center of the room with chairs around it? Well, um, because it allows, like, no matter where you're at, you can see most everyone else. And so it offers a format that encourages or enables collaboration and dialogue. And um, so here's some things that happen inside the boardroom. I'm going to talk about what happens inside the boardroom, what happens outside the boardroom, and then I'm going to connect that to our lives, our emotional experience, and getting through negative emotion and creating the life that we want to live despite rheumatoid arthritis or any other physical limitation. Okay? So inside the boardroom, what goes on inside a boardroom? And again, I'm now taking us back to like an office environment, a work context, and I'll apply it to our life. But come with me to the office environment. All right, we've got a table, we've got chairs around the table, and people walk in, and we have multiple people sitting around the table. And in this format, what goes on? We have many thoughts and opinions. People speaking, there's kind of like this fluidity of conversation. People aren't raising hands necessarily. Actually, I don't think I've ever really been in a boardroom in a work context. And usually, okay, how many people are there? Usually we'll have a boardroom for maybe anywhere between 6 and perhaps up to 20. 6 to 20 people. And when you have that many people and when you're in a boardroom where you can all see each other, there's there's no really hand raising. It's really just like observation, seeing who's talking, and seeing if anyone else by their body language is about to talk. If no one else is going to talk, then you go ahead and talk. You know, so you have this information, this all this visual um, input. You can see what is going on around the table and what how people's body language is, and you just kind of speak up when you want to get a word in, and and anyone and everyone at any time can speak, and so you get many thoughts and opinions. um, you also get, with that observation of people, that kind of visual input, you are observing body language. And with that body language, you're seeing low energy, you're seeing high energy, you're seeing people who are kind of slouched down, just kind of like on the verge of falling asleep. Maybe others are already asleep. You might have see others who are just like got their elbows up on the table. They're at the edge of their seat. They're just like, they are so full of energy. They're so engaged. It's like they're about to jump up onto the table. These super energetic, enthusiastic people. And then, of course, you have some people that aren't quite that enthusiastic and maybe is somewhere in between. But what I'm saying is, of course, you have energy levels all across this continuum of low energy and high energy. And what you also get inside of a boardroom is some potentially hurtful experiences, hurtful to you, right? Um, and that hurtful experience can come because of your thoughts about what others are saying. So many people are sharing thoughts and opinions, and you might have reaction to that that could be uncomfortable, um, or could be hurtful. Okay, those are just a few things we could probably list. I mean, you can comment what else happens in the boardroom. What else might you find? What kind of experience might we have around this table with 6 to 20 people? Um, these are just a few things I listed. I invite you to share anything else that's happening inside the boardroom in the comments. Okay? All right. Now we're going to paint the picture and kind of lay the foundation of and talk about what happens outside of the boardroom. Outside of the boardroom, and um, I mean, of course, outside the boardroom is broad. I'm going to use that. When I say outside of the boardroom, what I mean specifically is individual work. I'm going to define it that way. So outside the boardroom, I mean, it could mean, of course, anything and everything. You could be doing anything outside of the boardroom. You could be at a theme park. No, but that's not what I'm talking about. When I say outside of the boardroom, we're going to stay to a work context, and it's now individual. So we've got individual work, it's you and your work. All right, so that's what I mean by outside the boardroom. In that context, what's happening? Focused time. Um, really getting things done, execution. You're just like, it's just you and work. You get to have focused time, you get to get some work done. It's less conversation, right? You get to engage in your own strategic thinking, thinking about your work, the forward plan, um, and you also will have to acknowledge, and this is what I want to point out, in that strategic thinking, you're going to have blind spots. That strategic thinking is only coming from your brain and not from the perspective of others. So you will have limited information. And what also is in that experience outside of the boardroom is perceived safety. Why? Because you're not being exposed to all the opinions, the thoughts, the views of other people. You don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with the potential opinions or even the energy of someone that might just bother you or threaten you or any of those things. So you have this perceived safety, the sense of safety. And I'm saying perceived because what happens when you're outside of the boardroom is you're doing work and you're in this situation where you feel safe and at the same time, you don't really know what's going on. You don't have the information of others. So, what could actually be going on while you're feeling safe is some looming danger or some looming risk because you're lacking that information. You by yourself don't have access to all the information from many other people that have that information. And so you're not aware of these looming dangers or risks. Okay, so now that, go ahead and comment if there's anything else about this experience outside of the boardroom. These are a few things that I noted. There might be others. So please feel free to share. So now let's talk about why the boardroom is useful and why being outside the boardroom is useful. Why is the boardroom useful? I mean, you get feedback from everyone. Um, and everyone, the benefit for you being at the boardroom is you're getting input from other people. The benefit of everyone at the boardroom is they're being heard. There's a sense of being heard. Um, at the boardroom is useful because you get rich information, a lot of information. And that allows you to do some problem solving and strategic work with the input and collaboration of others. You also have connection, empathy. You get to hear others. You get to relate to them in some way. And boardrooms are also useful because you can create clarity, unity. Everyone is hearing the same thing. They're all hearing all the comments and they're all hearing maybe the conclusion or the consensus. Or they're observing the lack of consensus, right? But there is clarity. Everyone gets that same information. And that's kind of why boredom might be useful. So any other thoughts you have about why they're useful, please go ahead and share in the comments. Why being outside the boardroom is useful? Well, I mean, this is largely the things I already shared. You have this very dedicated time, focused attention. Um, you don't get distracted or interrupted. You get to crank out work. You get to like just get things done that are the things that are more appropriate or best achieved by an individual worker. Um, all right. So there's useful things about being in the boardroom and being outside the boardroom. So now let's transition. Let's apply this to the emotion boardroom. What is the emotion boardroom? Now that we've talked about the concept of a boardroom in the context of work and the office, let us bring this to our lives. Let us step out of the work context and talk about our day to day lives, being impacted by a physical limitation, experiencing fatigue, chronic pain, rheumatoid arthritis, being impacted by someone who has a disability of some sort, whatever it might be, you have this impact from a physical limitation. How is this boardroom concept useful? Let's dive into that. So, the emotion boardroom, we're going to use that same idea. We have a room with a table in the middle, surrounded by chairs, and the members of this boardroom conversation, the people sitting in these chairs, are emotions. Okay? We have emotions joining this boardroom, and um, and guess what? The emotions are many. There's many members of the boardroom. We might have 6, or we might have up to 20, or even more. But we'll say for any given moment in time, we can use this concept to understand there's a lot of emotions going on. There's a lot of vibration in our body. There's a lot of things we're experiencing, a lot of thoughts that we're having. And we're essentially experiencing a boardroom type experience with many emotions sitting around the table. And um, here's and so you have emotions at the table. That's inside the boardroom, and then outside the boardroom is the experience where you are kind of maybe dismissing the emotion, right? It's like the numbing concept I talked about earlier, kind of numbing or dismissing emotion, or you're just um, going to ignore emotion. You're not going to open up to all that input. You're going to just kind of focus on your task at hand or whatever it is. So so the emotion boardroom is the place where all the emotions are, and you're kind of opening up to them. And then outside the emotion boardroom is where you're closing off to all the emotional experience you might be experiencing, and you're just focused on getting things done or execution or um, something like that. Okay. Um, Here's the question I want to ask you. Are you spending time inside the emotion boardroom and outside the boardroom? As we discussed earlier, there is value being inside a boardroom and being outside a boardroom. Um, and I think that's also true with emotion. When we're experiencing our day to day and we're having emotions, there's times when it's very useful to step into the boardroom and open up to the emotion. There's also times when it's useful to maybe acknowledge that there is this emotional boredom. There's all these emotions happening, but I'm not going to really open up to all that right now. I'm acknowledging that it's there. I'm just going to let it be there, and I'm going to do my task at hand or focus on whatever I'm focused on. So, are you spending time inside and outside of the boardroom? Here's the next question. What is on average, how would you say that percent breaks down? Like, what percent of the time in an average day for you are you inside the emotion boardroom? What percent of your day are you outside the emotion boardroom? Um, share share with me in the comments. How would you how would you estimate? What would you estimate is the percent of time you're inside the emotion boardroom, percent of time outside the boardroom, emotion boardroom? Okay. Now, here's a few other questions to consider. When you step into the emotion boardroom, is everyone invited? In other words, does every emotion that you're experiencing have a seat at the table? Are you letting every emotion be there? If you aren't, why aren't you? Um, this is like, if we take this back to the work context, um, if there is purposeful exclusion of naysayers, right? If there's someone who has an opinion that you know is different from yours, if you purposefully exclude them, you are missing out on very important information. Because the naysayers, the people who are disagreeing with you, um, they have a reason for that. There's some reason, And as an organization or as a team, or if you think about it in a work context, to get the work done or to make decisions, you when you exclude that information of the naysayers, you're just you're making decisions absent of the whole story or all the facts. There might be some facts you're not getting. This is true with emotion. If you are excluding some negative emotions and saying you don't have a seat, there's perhaps some very useful information that you are cutting off. So I ask you again, is everyone invited? Is every emotion invited to the boardroom? Do they have a seat at the table? My next question for you to consider is, who is at the head of the table? If say at this boardroom, all one of the seats is you. One of the seats is you, and all the other seats is representing all of the emotion that you're experiencing. Who's at the head of the table? Um, is it you? I invite you to take the seat at the head of the table if you haven't already. If you aren't taking the seat at the head of the table, why aren't you? Um, you might say, well, anger gets that seat. In my boardroom, anger is at the head of the table, which means the person at the head of the table, I didn't elaborate on that before, the person at the head of the table is usually the one who's kind of facilitating the conversation a bit. Like at some point, all the voices are being heard, and someone needs to kind of bring that together. Someone needs to make decisions. Like, okay, based on all this information, all these views, what now? And you might say, I let anger make those decisions. If that's the case, why? And how useful is that for you? Are those decisions leading to good outcomes in your life? My guess is that they aren't. But you can let me know otherwise, of course. But I invite you to consider, if you haven't already, taking the seat at the head of the table. You open up to all the emotion. You let every single emotion be there. You take that input, you take that information, and then you make decisions based on that information. You determine what you do next or where you go from here. Um, okay, how do you access? How do you access all the emotions? How do you get a full emotional boardroom? Um, there's two quick things, and I'm not going to elaborate on them. I might share more detail on this over email if you want to get more information on this, including the notes from all this and maybe some of this further elaboration. There's a link that says more content, chandlerlifecoaching.com/more content. Check that out. You can go ahead and add yourself to that list, and you'll get the notes for this as well. Um, so I think I'll elaborate on this further uh, over email, but there's really two tools, and one is a thought download, and the other is a feeling download. Um, and I'll share more specifics on that over email, but um, it's a way to really just kind of get everything out that's going on in your head, and that's how you can get everyone at the table. Um, so let me wrap up by sharing a few more things about being in the boardroom and being outside the boardroom. Um, so these are going to be essentially just a few tips. I guess another way to offer this is these are tips for when you are in the boardroom and tips for when you are outside of the boardroom. All right. So when you are in the boardroom, get into your body. And when I say boardroom, I mean emotion boardroom, right? So now we're back to like our lives, our day-to-day lives. When you are in the boardroom, here's some tips. Get into your body. Open up to the emotions and sensations. That's how you access it. That's how you step into the emotion boardroom. This, of course, is an experience not at an office where there's a physical boardroom. This is an experience internally. And for you to create that internal emotion boardroom, you've got to bring your attention to your body. Get into your body. Bring your attention to your body, understanding what vibrations you're experiencing, what emotions you're having, and be open up. be open to them. Be open to everything happening in your body. That's um, how you can create that emotion boardroom experience. The next tip, when you're stepping into the boardroom, be willing to let all voices be heard. Have a willingness to let any emotion take a seat at the table. And not just sit there, but to be heard. Another tip number 3 is give yourself assurance that you will have your back no matter what is said by others or the energy that they're bringing. As head of the table, and by creating this board environment, you are allowing every voice to be heard. And some of them might be naysayers. Some of them might say things that you don't agree with, or might be somewhat of a threat to you, or almost like an attack on you. And to really comfortably have this emotion boardroom experience, you need to step into it with assurance that only you can provide. Assurance only you can provide that you have your back no matter what. You are emotionally holding yourself. You're giving yourself compassion, you're giving yourself love. You're also loving others. You're withholding judgment of others. You're letting them say what they say. You are being completely open to all thoughts and opinions, and you're having your back no matter what, meaning that you will not um, absorb. You won't immediately absorb anyone else's opinion. You are kind of stepping in that boardroom with some openness. It's almost like if you think about it as like an investigation on like a court case maybe, or if you think about it in terms of researchers trying to understand a topic better, you're kind of in that mode. Or a scientist who's doing an experiment, you're just like, hey, I'm here just to listen, to get information. I'm not here to absorb it or to take it personally or to um, make quick conclusions. I'm here to have my own back and to just be open to what's being said. Okay. Fourth tip in the boardroom: speak up. You're also one of the voices, and you're at the head of the table, and you share your opinion. The emotions are going to be there. They have information, and you can even like in this idea of a boardroom. It's just I think what's useful about this concept, how I've been using it, is like when I imagine an emotion as a person, it kind of sounds silly, but it's like, hey, Um, discouragement. Let's hear from you. it it just makes it easier for me to open up to the emotion and to extract whatever information might be there. Um, relevant, useful information for me right now. It's coming from that discouragement that's showing up, or that anxiety that's showing up, or the confusion, or the doubt. I'm like, hey, oh, it's confusion. Tell me what's on your mind. Um, so they're all speaking up, and I'm speaking up as well. So speak up, share your view. They'll share their view, and you'll listen to them. You won't necessarily speak up to like tell them they're wrong. You can just also share your opinion too. We're not here to like say who's right and who's wrong. We're just here to get all the information out on the table, and then know when to step outside of the boardroom. And I'm gonna share more on that over email. So if you want to get that, you can click the link and be added to the list. Now, finally, some tips for being outside of the boardroom. If you're outside of the boardroom, the emotion's still going to be there. Like I started at the beginning, emotion is always there. So if you're stepping outside of the boardroom, um, make sure that you acknowledge the emotion. You're not necessarily taking time to have the dialogue, but you still need to acknowledge there's emotion. There is still this boardroom taking place. There's all these emotions. And you just need to allow them, right? You're just kind of allowing them. You're not like spending a whole lot of time with them and having a conversation, but you just allow them and you do your work anyway. What that might mean at times is that um, you want to pursue one of your goals. Like for me, I've talked about before, is running a Spartan race, and I have chronic pain, and I have pain in my wrists and my hands, and When I step outside of the boardroom, it looks like this. I'm going to start doing some push-ups to train for the Spartan race. And as soon as I start, I have some pain. And so I have physical pain and I have emotional discomfort. That emotional discomfort is like fear. Fear saying, oh my word, you can't do this. There's something terrible happening because of the pain you're experiencing. The sensation coming from your body is a red flag. You got to stop. And in this case, I know that I knew that I was safe. I wasn't doing something that would cause harm to me physically. Uh, and so when I'm outside of the boardroom, I'm just acknowledging the fear. I'm like, oh, there's this fear here telling me I should not continue with this workout. I shouldn't do these push ups. And I proceed anyway, right? I'm just going to do the push up anyway. I'm not going to like consult the emotion boardroom right now. I'm going to do the push up. I'm going to do the thing that I'm pursuing. Okay, so that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, be intentional with your time. This is you and your time to pursue your goals or your interests or to create that kind of day-to-day experience you want to create. Be very intentional with that. 3, use quiet time and stillness to think strategically. When you're not opening up to the dialogue of everyone else, you really can capitalize on that time that you have for yourself. And you'll have all this distraction, these emotions always there, but you can take moments to step away from it and just get into your higher brain, right? So you can also think about the emotional boardroom as your lower brain. We can conceptualize it that way, and stepping outside of the emotion boardroom being your higher brain, accessing your prefrontal cortex and your logical self. Um, that is making decisions and planning. Tip number 4, be aware that you have blind spots. When you are in that strategic space and you're stepping outside of the emotion boardroom, there's a lot of information you might not have at the moment. And you might need at some point to step back into the emotion boardroom, get some more information. Hear from anger, anxiety, disappointment. We might need to step back into that and hear again. But when you're stepping outside of it, just be aware you might have some blind spots. You might be without some of the wisdom of the boardroom. And finally, know when to step inside of the boardroom. Okay, so that's what I have today. The emotion boardroom. A concept that allows us to access the wisdom of emotion and balance that with kind of resuming or pursuing our day-to-day activities and being able to live our lives and bring emotion along with us and to tap into the emotion in powerful ways, useful ways, without getting overwhelmed by it, so that we can bring that along, access that wisdom, and take action. Take action toward the things that we want most in our life. Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to share any other comments, how this lands for you, what this concept might unlock for you, or what might be confusing about it. Any questions you have, I'd love to continue the dialogue over comments in any way. And with that, have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll speak again next time. Bye, everyone.